The last round. Rocky Balboa had always been a fighter. He fought his way from the streets of Philadelphia to the championship ring, defeating odds that no one believed he could. But behind every punch, every victory, there was a dream that kept him going. The dream of proving that he could stand toe-to-toe with the world and never back down. It wasn't about winning belts or becoming a legend. It was about proving his worth to himself more than anyone else. But what if that dream could never truly be achieved? As the years wore on, the fights became harder, and the victories, though sweet, felt hollow. Rocky's body ached, his bones creaked, and his once sharp reflexes began to dull. He had fought more rounds than he could count, but the fire that burned inside him refused to die, even as his body begged for rest. One night, after a long day at his restaurant, Rocky stood in the gym, staring at the old punching bag that had seen better days. The dim lights cast long shadows across the floor, and the smell of sweat and dust filled the air. He wrapped his hands slowly, methodically, as though preparing for one more fight, one final round. But as he raised his fists to strike the bag, something strange happened. The room seemed to grow colder, the air heavier, the familiar creaks and groans of the gym faded, replaced by an eerie silence that sent a chill down Rocky's spine. He paused, his fists hovering in the air, and for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of dread. "What's going on here?" he muttered to himself, his breath visible in the sudden chill. From the shadows, a voice emerged, low and haunting, like the sound of an old bell tolling in the distance. "Rocky." Rocky's heart skipped a beat. He turned, but there was no one there. The gym was empty, just as it had been when he arrived. "You think you can keep fighting, Rocky?" The voice continued, cold and mocking. "You think you can outrun time?" Rocky clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "Who's there? Show yourself!" The shadows seemed to move, twisting and bending around the edges of the room, but no figure appeared. Only the voice, growing louder, more insistent. "You fought for so long, but every fighter falls, Rocky. Every fighter meets their end." In the days that followed, Rocky couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The voice haunted him, echoing in his mind like a ghost that refused to be silenced. At night, he dreamed of the ring, an endless fight against faceless opponents, his body growing weaker with each passing round. No matter how hard he punched, how fast he moved, he couldn't win. He couldn't escape. Adrian noticed the change in him. "Rock, you haven't been yourself lately," she said one morning as they sat at the kitchen table, the soft light of dawn filtering through the window. "You're not still thinking about getting back in the ring, are you?" Rocky shook his head, forcing a smile. "Nah, Adrian, I'm just thinking." But the truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The voice, the shadows, it was all getting to him in a way that no opponent ever had. He had faced death in the ring, come close more times than he could count. But this was different. This wasn't a fight he could win with his fists. One night, unable to sleep, Rocky returned to the gym. The silence was oppressive, the air thick with tension. He stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. The man looking back at him was older, his face lined with the scars of a lifetime in the ring. But behind those eyes, the fire still burned. He wasn't done. Not yet. "I can do this," he whispered to himself, his breath fogging the glass. I can keep fighting." But as the words left his lips, the shadows in the room seemed to come alive. They crept along the walls, twisting and writhing like dark tendrils, moving closer, surrounding him. "You can't fight forever, Rocky," the voice hissed, more menacing than ever. "Time catches up with everyone." Rocky's heart raced, his fists clenching at his sides. "I ain't afraid of you," he growled, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. The shadows laughed, a low, guttural sound that filled the room. "You should be." As the days turned into weeks, Rocky's nightmares grew worse. He dreamed of the ring, but it was no longer a place of victory. It was a place of torment, where the ropes tightened around him like a noose, and the canvas beneath his feet turned to quicksand, pulling him down, suffocating him. His opponents were shadows, faceless and relentless, their punches landing harder and harder until he could barely stand. He woke each morning drenched in sweat, his body aching as though he had been through a real fight. But it wasn't just the dreams that haunted him. The voice, the shadows, they were everywhere. In the gym, at the restaurant, even in his own home. No matter where he went, he couldn't escape. "You can't outrun the end, Rocky," the voice whispered in his ear late one night as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. "Every fighter falls. Every dream dies." Rocky squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the voice, but it was no use. The darkness was closing in, and for the first time in his life, Rocky Balboa didn't know how to fight back. The final confrontation came on a stormy night. Rocky stood alone in the gym, the rain pounding against the windows like a relentless drumbeat. The shadows in the room were deeper than ever, twisting and writhing like living creatures. The voice was louder now, filling the space around him. "This is the last round, Rocky," it whispered, cold and unforgiving. "You can't win." Rocky's heart pounded in his chest, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "I've been fighting all my life," he said through gritted teeth. "I ain't giving up now." The shadows laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "You're already finished." Rocky took a deep breath, his muscles tense, his body coiled like a spring. He raised his fists, ready to fight, even though he knew deep down that this wasn't a battle he could win. But he wasn't fighting for victory anymore. He was fighting because it was all he knew. With a roar, he swung at the shadows, his fists cutting through the air, but there was nothing to hit, only darkness, endless and suffocating. His punches grew slower, weaker, until finally, he fell to his knees, gasping for breath. The voice surrounded him, cold and merciless. "It's over, Rocky. You can't fight forever." As the darkness closed in around him, Rocky Balboa, the fighter who had never given up, realized the painful truth. Some fights couldn't be won. Some dreams couldn't be achieved. And in the end, even the greatest fighters had to face the final bell.